First of all, I want to thank Joe Mulholland, despite all the changes in government, for keeping me on the list, Joe. And I have to say, I had a rather electrifying moment last night when Barry McGovern looked straight at me and talked as King Creon about how he didn't believe in women being in the Assembly. So just let me say, I've been very happy that among the first decisions I've been able to make is that of 11 Labour appointees to Minister and Minister of State and the Attorney-General, I'm happy to say that 5 of those are women, which, not for the bean counters here, but is reaching the 40% mark. So I suppose small steps, but nonetheless important steps. In remembering Seamus Heaney and his integrity and his humanity, I just want to recall a line in Heaney's translation of Beowulf, which reads, "Anyone with gumption and a sharp mind," and we've heard a lot of that from each of our contributors here, will take the measure of 2 things, what's said and what's done. It's a line that speaks to modern audiences because it appears to suggest that words must be matched by actions. In fact, the character speaking is a Coast Guard who, convinced by the sincerity of Beowulf's words upon his arrival on Danish shore, allows passage. Words could be as trustworthy as deeds in the culture in which Beowulf was set. But we have reason for reading that line in the way that we do, because history has taught us that there can be a glaring difference between what's said and what's done, by rulers, by states, by institutions, by organisations, by those we are supposed to trust. So any person looking to measure the trustworthiness and credibility of the institutions that play a role in their lives will measure both utterance and deed. But restoring trust in our institutions is not simply a matter of leaders matching words with actions. There is a second problem, which is to do with the cynicism that now surrounds politics and public life, the notion that motives are always questionable and that nothing is done simply in the public interest. Given the long history of political and institutional scandals here and abroad, that is not surprising, and each of my fellow panellists has mentioned a significant number. It arguably means, however, that even when words are matched with actions, leaders cannot of themselves restore trust in institutions. They can only work to regain trust through credible reform and sustained commitment to best practice that is both visible and persuasive. Because it is the individual, not the institution, who will take the measure of what's said and what's done, who will ultimately decide whether trust is warranted or not. Ireland has been through an economic and social crisis, and trust in our institutions has taken a battering. I believe trust can be regained, but it will be slow and a deliberate task because we simply cannot ask or expect the people to take a leap of faith. We must show by evidence that faith is warranted again. Faith is also built through participation. People believe in democracy because they have a say in it, and people will believe again in our major institutions if they have a say in shaping their reform. So the process of rebuilding trust must be an inclusive one if it is to succeed. Today I want to talk about the substantial work this government has done to begin that process and further steps we should consider taking. From legislation to protect whistleblowers to the overhaul of our constitution, sustained and deep-rooted reform of our institutions is underway, and the public shaping of that constitutional overhaul in particular offers a way forward that is full of potential for regaining trust. It's not only politics that has fallen in public trust. In Ireland in recent years, we have seen a major erosion of trust in the institutions that dominated the first 90 years of this state. The scandals that surrounded the Catholic Church have been well documented and discussed. The reckless greed of our financial institutions and the failure of our regulatory system to control them brought the country to the brink of bankruptcy. And you know, when you hear the transcripts of the Anglo tapes in the Independent and in other media, you know, the crude voices, the kind of vulgar, expletive, deleted kind of language of the lads in control. It is a kind of vulgarity that also, I suppose, shows what at the time was a seemingly overweening power. And that was where the institutional regulatory failures, I think, particularly occurred. The erosion of trust is not an Irish phenomenon alone. I think it's important that we should understand that. The 2008 crash, while spectacular in Ireland on a world scale and a historic scale, was also a global one. And a number of corporations played an unforgivable role in the economic collapse. Rising inequality has destroyed any public faith in the existence of a universal idea of fairness. And I think from the political side, fairness has to be part of the reform equation. It's not simply about civil servants and perfect administrative systems. It has to be how we experience our own country and our own society. Even in sport, doping has cast doubt over some amazing sporting achievements, and so on. It's in little doubt then that public trust in institutions is eroding. I cannot speak here today for the church, the banks, the media, and so on. But I can speak for the government in terms of what the political system must do to regain trust. I believe my own party has a strong record in changing Ireland through the major programme of reform that we have embarked on since we entered government and indeed have been part of previous governments. These reforms are political, institutional and societal. We've restored freedom of information provisions to make government decisions more open and transparent to the public. We have banned corporate donations to political parties. I'm very happy to see in the audience today Etna Fitzgerald, who was at the forefront of these major changes in relation to freedom of information and ethics and general governance in relation to political parties a long time ago. We're leading currently the most profound change in the history of An Garda Síochána through the establishment of a Garda authority. This is something that's much been discussed in the Labour Party, to be honest, over the decades. I think it's a wider conversation now, and it's great that it's been accepted. We're commencing new legislation to protect whistleblowers, as well as bringing in the legislation finally on the Independent Garda Authority by the end of this year. Last year, we introduced new laws to protect the lives of women by legislating for the X case, after how many years of discussion and of disagreement, and serious disagreement on the issues. But while I'm proud of what we've already achieved, I'm also conscious that there's much more to do. That's why in the statement of priorities that the government has agreed for the remainder of its term, we've set a number of key commitments. For example, we will bring forward legislation to establish an electoral commission to ensure best practice and probity in our election processes. We'll also hold a number of referendums next year to give the public their say on the recommendations of the Constitutional Convention. That brings me to a proposal I believe we should actually consider. namely that the Constitutional Convention should become a regular feature of our public life. The Constitutional Convention is a Labour Party idea adopted and accepted by this government, and I think by everybody involved in politics in the country and interested in public affairs at this point in time. The idea is simple, that a fundamental review of our Constitution should be carried out by the people to whom it belongs. The Convention has shown all of us that more citizen involvement can be a powerful force for progressive change. What's more, as Convention Chairperson Tom Arnold has noted, one interesting outcome was the increased level of mutual respect that developed between citizens and politicians as they worked together. In other words, trust was fostered. We've committed to holding referenda next year in line with the Convention's recommendations on marriage equality and ending discrimination in respect of who can be married, reducing the voting age, and reducing the age of candidacy of the President. Further referendums may follow on foot of other recommendations by the Convention. But rather than stopping there, we could go further. Our Constitution is a living document owned by the people, and the Convention has given us a template to review it in precisely the careful, deliberative and democratic manner that we need. We could make the Convention a regular feature of public life so that every 5 years or every decade the Constitution would be reviewed in a methodological way, and the public would have their say in that process. For trust to be regained, public participation in the reform of our institutional processes is essential. But it does not negate the need for leadership. And even if there's a growing cynicism about politics and political leaders, it doesn't let us off the hook to simply shy away from responsibility or ask the public to decide on every course of action. We were elected for a reason, to effect positive change in the best interests of our people. And if we fail at that, the public will rightly let us know at election time. When I think of the issues that more than anything have led to global erosion of trust in politics, I think of inequality. The French economist Thomas Piketty has been making quite a splash by his assertion that we are heading towards a new Gilded Age because so much of the growth in wealth in recent decades has gone to the richest people in all our different societies. Meanwhile, ordinary people have seen their income stagnate alongside disturbing trends towards insecure forms of employment and the shrinking influence of trade unions. Politics is supposed to be the instrument whereby the power of the majority can make itself felt to counteract the underlying trend to inequality. I don't think that this has happened. J.K. Galbraith once said that the complaints of the privileged are too often confused with the voice of the masses. And those complaints of the privileged are precisely what trickle-down economics served for the past number of decades. This was the notion promoted most frequently by the super-rich that if we protected them, their wealth would trickle down to everybody else. The great tragedy of trickle-down economics is that it gradually dismantled the post-war social democrat, Christian democrat settlement, which had for several decades succeeded in reducing inequality and improving living standards. If living standards, though, fall and people feel that the traditional roads to opportunity are closed, they abandon their trust in the mechanisms that historically served their interests. It is for this reason the urgent need to address falling living standards that I set out the case in recent weeks for a low-pay commission. This would be an independent body tasked with making annual recommendations to government on the appropriate level of the minimum wage and related matters. I'm delighted that the Taoiseach agreed on the need for such a commission and that the Minister of State, Jed Nash, has been assigned special responsibility for establishing it as a priority. This is only one of many steps we have to take. But when it comes to tackling inequality, we also need a fundamental shift at a global level. And I, for one, am very glad that a debate on the need for such a new approach is finally underway. If you read the IMF's Managing Director, Christine Lagarde's speeches this year, you will notice the sense of alarm now evident about the economic and social damage that rising inequality can cause. Similarly, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, has warned that unchecked market fundamentalism can devour our social capital. President Obama speaks of the need to build the recovery from the middle out, that's people at work on low and middle incomes, as opposed to building it from the top down, meaning the economy will grow by helping those people who are on ordinary incomes, not the people on obscene incomes. In other words, we must work to achieve full employment, fair wages and increased living standards. And this is a virtuous circle, because if we get people back to work, small businesses will flourish, public finances will improve, and room will be created for new investment in essential services such as healthcare, education and transport. Since coming to office, the government has focused, by necessity, as has been said earlier, on economic repair. In recent weeks, I've spoken extensively on my belief that there's now an urgent need for an equal emphasis on social repair, and the conditions have been created to achieve it. It's a window of opportunity. It's small, but it's there and we need to utilise it. This is as true of the European Union as it is of Ireland. A return, though, to economic growth of itself will not be enough. Society has to flourish as well. And, you know, again, going back to last night and those deep issues, King Creon and Tigane, that Seamus Heaney put forth, it could have been about today. It was, we know from the programme note, probably about yesterday and what happened in Iraq. But these are the continuing core debates. So we need a social recovery to accompany the economic recovery so that we deliver renewed prosperity for all our people. And we have to provide leadership on this. This is why in the statement of priorities, the government have made clear that the emphasis will be on social recovery, and we've also made it clear that we will work with our European allies to see similar policies implemented across the EU. A social recovery that reduces inequality would be firm and conclusive evidence that our political institutions are working in our people's best interests. It would go a long way to regaining trust, and we are wholeheartedly committed to it. But as I say, if we are to truly restore trust in government, in public life, in our institutions, it cannot be a unilateral process. It must involve our institutions, not just working for the people, but working with the people to achieve it. Thank you.